And I guess I'm kicking off now.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, I'm not trouble with that. Thank you. So what we just want to really talk about what's freshest for me at the moment, and in terms of wellbeing. I've just been through a 5-day retreat with Jack and Gabriella. Very privileged to do that. It was absolutely fabulous. And for me, when I'm thinking about wellbeing, there were 2 key points that they taught. And one of those points was about helping us help our clients see their own health. And we've been talking about this over, I wasn't in the room yesterday, but this is what's going to keep coming up, I presume, is that it's already there. And we've heard that this morning on the stage on the panel. It's helping people see that. I'm going to speak about my experience of the retreat. I had a couple of real profound shifts. Some people, I can see some faces here that were there, and they can be testament to that. On the last day, Jack always likes to do a closing circle. We do an open circle on the first day where we say why we're there and what we want to get out of the circle. And on that opening circle, we had somebody with us who was quite nervous about coming. He was very depressed. He called me a week before he came and said, I don't know whether to come. I'm really not in a good space. I've spent $120,000 trying to understand the principles, and I'm just like, I don't know. Do I come? Will I upset the group? Is it worth me coming? I've spent all this money and all this time. I've been all over the place. I won't name all the names. I've been to see people, spent time with people, just not getting the principles. And I talked to him for about an hour on the telephone. Jack had some email conversations with him. In the end, he decided to come. And he told me on the telephone that every time, well, just generally in life, because he's in deep depression, that he plays a role. Well, he plays a role. He knows how to play that role. He knows how to make people laugh. He knows how to be cheerful. He knows how to play that role. And so the suggestion was that come along and don't play the role. Come be with us. And I did the best that I could to explain that with Jack's trainings, I've been on Jack's trainings, organised them for Catcher for the last 5 years. And there's always been such a beautiful, supportive group, and some of you in here have been there and you know that there always seems to be such a connection with people and such a support for people. So I encouraged him to come. Hard to explain on the phone how that feels. And so he came in, and we didn't know what was going to happen. And that first morning, we're going around the circle and it comes to him. And sure enough, he just said, do you know what? I always play a role when I'm at these things. And today, I'm not going to do that. And he started to talk about how he was feeling and what was going on for him, and explaining, what I've just said about going to lots of places and just not getting these principles. He was such a gift to us because it felt to me, anyway, my experience of that was that he allowed, or he gave permission somehow to people in that room from the first moment, that first hour, to be themselves. And by that I mean just not filtering anything, not worrying about what the people thought. It's just so beautiful. Those 5 days were just people being themselves. And it didn't really not impact me, that's not right. I guess it helped me realise how much stuff I've been carrying around with me, or do carry around with me still probably. It highlighted for me the well-being, the innate health, the peace, the love that we are. I love Jack's quote, that's why it's on our programme. You know, all we are is peace, love and wisdom with the power to create the illusion that we're not. And for me personally, I didn't realise how much of an illusion I was creating. And a lot happened over the 5 days. The closing circle on the last day, I think I was last but one to speak in that closing circle. There's the emotion coming. That's okay, because it doesn't mean anything. I don't know whether some people in here will know that Mark and I, our relationship finished in August. And I was able, and I'm sitting here now being able to do that again, I just was just okay with the emotion. And he said something, he was sitting next to me and he said something on that closing circle, and I couldn't even tell you what it is now. No idea, but something within me just crumbled. And I guess it's the ego, it's the thoughts that fell away. And I just stopped crying, and I couldn't even take my turn. Katya had to go next, and it came back to me. And I just felt in that moment that everything had fallen away, and I was me. Whoever that is, whatever that means, there was nothing there. It felt like a word started coming out of my mouth, but I don't know where they came from, but I heard myself saying stuff and was like, whoa, I don't do this in public, I don't say things like this in public. And it felt so peaceful, so calm, and just so, I don't know, real. It's that sense, and I hope that most of you in this room know what I mean. There's no words to put on it really. It's that sense of, again, no words, love, peace, calm. And for me that's when we're talking about well-being, when I first when I first heard about the principles and people would talk about well-being, I thought that meant being well. And I heard my friend Maureen say that when I interviewed the leader for VIVA, and that really impacted me and said, yeah, I didn't realise I thought that's what it meant being well. But that's not what we're talking about, I don't think. We're not talking about being well physically, or even being well completely emotionally. It's about understanding that we think and emotions are created. But this core of well-being is the essence of who we really are, without added personal thinking that we're all using and we're all walking around with. That was just that experience that I had at that retreat. So some people are not going to remember. It's just so very special for me, so I wanted to share that story.
God, I love this woman. Yeah, sometimes I think that the more we talk, the more complicated we make it. And Sid Banks was always on our backs for keeping it simple. And when I think of how I used to talk about this stuff, compared to the way I talk about it now, I shudder, to think what I used to say. But I mean, to me, there's only two things going on. There's our natural well-being, that pure spiritual essence that's within every one of us, and there's thinking ourselves away from it. Period. That's it. And when we think ourselves away from it, we don't have to be frightened by that. We don't have to be scared of it, because it's just us thinking ourselves away from it. Period. Doesn't mean anything. And when we stop thinking ourselves away from it, we're automatically back to our spiritual essence, because it never went anywhere in the first place. Just got covered up, got obscured. So I can, drop in my thinking with the best of them And I can get into states where I'd rather not be, that are not comfortable, where there's some suffering involved. But my way out is, as long as I know that it's just me using my power of thought combined with my power of consciousness against myself, inadvertently, I get lost for a little while, then I realize what I'm doing, usually after the fact. I realize what I'm doing, and I come back, because it didn't mean anything. And to me, that's health. You know, we can be down in the dumps with our thinking, and as long as we know that it's just our thinking and it doesn't mean anything, we are back in our well-being, even if we're not feeling it in the moment. So I would like to just open it up to your questions and comments, because that's what these breakout sessions are supposed to be about. And in the last one, we had a very nice discussion, so I'm hoping that you live up to them. So, yeah, floor is open to you. Yes.
Yeah.
Trevor.
I would just like to say about that well-being. Probably 2.5 years ago, I had, due to excessive pressure, mental pressure building up over me over many years, I had a complete breakdown. And it got to the stage where I couldn't function as a human being. If ever you see somebody who's depressed, perhaps you've got somebody yourself, and somebody saying, you know, I need my bed, I can't get out of bed. I could not believe the draw of that bed to get me in. And most of the time I couldn't function, I couldn't do the basic living things for a while. But all the time through that, there was this spark of light, which I've had all through my life, which was shining underneath this. And even though I couldn't cope with all these things, I still clung on to that. Not clung on to it, but it was there. I was guided by this spark of light within me. And I think that is the well-being, and it's the, whether you call it the energy, the God, or whatever, throughout yourself. So even in my darkest moments there, I was able to see that light, which was great, because in some way I felt comfortable underneath all of the darkness and everything. I felt comfortable. And eventually, that light, whether the mind was involved or whether it opened up, and it led me back to an understanding with the three principles, which has helped me since to come out of it. But
Trevor, how did you know that that light was there?
I could sense it, I could feel it, all through my whole body. We all sense that there's something there. You know, we grew up without the sun, I'm Peter the painter who lives at number 25 or whatever, but underneath we know there's something else there. And I've known it all my life, that there's something else there. But the spark has always been there, the little light inside me, which has gone against the grain all through my life. Because the world's telling you to do this and telling you to do that. But with me, it was saying, hang on, no, you follow this is who you are. So you call it instinct, I don't know. You call it intuition, you call it that God, that well-being. But it's been there, and as long as I stay close to it and follow it. But it shone brighter when everything else around me collapsed. And one thing I've noticed, being around the three principles for the last few years, I'm struck by the percentage of people involved in the three principles who've either had a complete breakdown, or they've had a life-changing incident or close to death incident, or they live with a chronic illness. Which I think when you have that sort of thing, the everyday, what I would call trivial things, melt away, and then you can clearly see a bit better that well-being. I think that has probably guided them to to the three principles that way. That's my take on it, and what I see.
Well, I'm not one of those people.
No, no, I know, Jack. I wouldn't have included you.
So it is possible to grasp the three principles without having a disaster happen. It's comforting. Great. Thank you, Trevor. Anybody else?
Just a light-hearted one, really. Like personal thinking. Just wondered, any facilitators thought of approaching a few politicians?
Oh my God.
Don't talk about Trump to Jack.
Oh my God. See, that's reality. That has nothing to do with Didn't I say in the first session that we had that even Trump is in the outside world, and we make of that. It has meaning to us. We make meaning of that to us, and whether we end up living in well-being in spite of it, or whether we are totally down in the dumps about it. That's up to us. And that's no different than any other thing that happens on the face of the earth. There's stuff that happens out there, and then we take it with our own thinking. Consciousness makes it real, makes it look real, when it's really just our creation of illusion, and we get an experience of it. It's always all that's going on. And when our mind clears of that thinking, or our mind calms down, we are left with automatic well-being, because it never went anywhere in the first place. I said in the last group that when there are a lot of people out there that search for well-being, and when people search for well-being, they're saying they don't have it. So automatically they're off the scent, so to speak. If we, and how do we know? How do we know that it's there? It's because when our mind calms down or clears, how do you feel? We feel more peace of mind. We feel more love. We get more thoughts from wisdom. And it's like not trying to convince anybody of anything. It just, that's the way we are. And all we have to, do is look in the direction of the way we really are. And then we know. Others? Yes, Steph?
Yeah, I love that. Trump being outside. It reminded me of that really short thing that Sid said about there's nothing outside that can hurt us, and there's nothing outside that can help us. There is no outside. I always smile and laugh, because that really goes deep for me. Really sums it up.
Yes, so interestingly, there's somebody in this room, who I won't name names, somebody in this room was talking to me at the break and says that the past absolutely has a hold on her and is absolutely real. So even when Sid says something like that, there are people who believe, in fact there are a lot of people who believe the opposite. Now, what if the only thing that could possibly be going on Because a lot of very difficult things have happened to a lot of people in the past. You know, there's people who grow up with abuse. There's people who grow up with violence. There's people who grow up, you know, with their family being alcoholics or drug addicts. And there's just a tremendous number, there's traumatic events that happen. There's a tremendous number of difficult things that can happen to people. But it's just like everything else. Any of those things are happening in the outside world. And then we take this creative gift of the power of thought to think anything. And we come up with that it has a tremendous effect on our lives. But we're the ones that decide that, not by going out of our way to decide that. But inadvertently, our thinking sometimes has a tendency to make people feel miserable as a result of what they think happened in the past, when it's really just their thinking about the past. And I'm not saying that those things are you know, those things are terrible, okay? Those things are terrible that happen to people. There's no question about that. And yet, the way we come out of them, is our own thinking. I mean, I bring this example up a lot, but it always sticks in my mind. So in a training of mine, there were two women, both of whom, at age 15, had been violently raped. One of them came out of that experience and she said, "I'm damaged goods. You know, it ruined my life." And she therefore went about her business as if her life was ruined. And she got heavily into drugs. She got into selling drugs. She got into prostituting herself for drugs. And because in her mind, her life was just meaningless. Didn't matter what she did. The other woman said, "Yeah, that was a horrible thing that happened, but I'm not going to let it affect my life." And she lived her life as if she wasn't affected by it. The same thing had happened. That's the power of thought. And that's how we create our lives without realizing that we're doing it. I do not mean to be dominating
No,
here.
that's cool.
How do you not fear events like that happening in the future?
Well, how do you not fear events like that happening in the future? Well, why would we fear something that we don't know whether it's going to happen or not? I mean, we could, but does it make any sense? I mean, let's say we feared that that was going to happen, and let's say it didn't. That would have meant all of that fear would have been wasted energy. And let's say we feared it and it did happen. Well, did our fear do any good? Did it change anything? No. Either way, fear is useless, you know, in that situation. So when we see that it's useless, then there just tends to be a little separation between our fear and ourselves. And that separation raises us in levels of consciousness, even if it's one notch. One notch. it looks just a little easier to deal with. Does that help?
Yeah.
Great.
That's the wonderful thing, that we have this power, the free will on the earth. And Eckhart Tolle, I was listening to him, and he talks about worry, and it was very meaningful and a big help. He asked, are you sure that this worry, what you have, is going to happen? Of course we are not. So, as we have free will, why don't you choose the positive end? And it's in your hands. So, exactly the same what you just mentioned, that we can choose.
You know, I actually don't deal in the world of choice. Because to me, choice is a doing thing. And I like to deal in the world of seeing. You know, because we don't have a choice if we don't see that we have a choice. I mean, we really do, but if we don't see it, it doesn't matter. So the question is what we see. And what we see determines what we get in the form of an experience. Do you have anything to add to that, Sheela?
No, I was agreeing with the choice piece. I think that's really, yeah.
Or it's more like what we feel. So what we see, what we feel. Can I believe that I can deserve a positive end in this situation?
Yeah. So if you know that you could potentially see positive in that situation, it's different from going out of our way to try to think positive in a situation. If we just see the possibility that we could possibly think positive in this situation, then we have a tendency to think positive in that situation. But if we're thinking negative and we try to think positive because we think we have a choice, but we don't really see that we have a choice, it's going to be awfully hard to think positive. So.
Yeah, it's just to finish this, sorry, that you pointed what I feel to that maybe my expression was not correct with this choice, that like this law of attraction and positive thinking, you're forcing yourself to be positive, but what is your belief system behind? Deep inside you really feel it, or you're just trying to prove it to yourself?
Yeah, that's great.
So there is the key point, I guess.
Yes.
That's my question.
I just wanted to have a reflection I had about past and future. And I think that at the end, like, we've never been in the past or the future.
Say that again.
We have never been in the past or the future.
Oh, yes.
And to my understanding, past and the future is a mental construction. It's a thought. It's a human thought. And worrying about the past is worrying about the thought. So it won't get you anywhere. What you think that happened in your past is a current thought happening right now. So you are building on it, but there is not such a thing as the past. There's nothing happened in the past. Everything is happening right now.
Yeah, if I can say that in a different way, the past no longer exists. The only way it can exist for us is if we take it into the present in our own thinking. So whatever we think about the past is what it is to us in this moment. Same thing with the future. The future doesn't exist. The only way that it exists for us now is if we have thoughts about it in the future. I mean, thoughts about it in the present, about the future. That's it. It's always now. It's always now.
I've got a question. In order to understand how we are now and the behaviour patterns and stuff that we exhibit now, I really believe that we do need to look at our past in order to see where those patterns have come from in the first place, in order to see things differently. I would love to just say, oh, well, my past is my past, it's got nothing to do with now, that would just be so easy, my life would be easy if I could do that. But I can't do that. I would love to do it. I'm sort of really new to the principles as well, so I understand that people may have more consciousness about this, but for me, like, the past has created me like how I am now, and in order for me to move forward, I need to understand the past and understand where the patterns came from in order to be able to change them. It's like, it sort of strikes a chord with me when everyone's saying the past doesn't exist. For me, it's real and it does exist. It's like, ever since I read your book, I've been thinking that, you know, although I get moments of clarity where I really glimpse what's being said, that, you know, the way I see things and the way I think about things is what creates things for me. I'm still really lost in my thinking, and for me a lot of that does come from the past. You know, my past, you know, I've had bad things happen like everyone has, but they have affected me in a certain way and created like thought patterns and stuff.
Well, did you want to say something to that? Okay. So consider. Consider that there's a possibility that it might not be the past, but it might be our thinking about the past. I mean, just consider that that may be a possibility and see what happens. I don't mean right at this moment, but and I'm not suggesting to try. I'm just suggesting to open yourself up to the possibility. Like it's like planting a question mark.
It's like me and my sister, we've had the same past and we both turned out completely differently. My sister's really logical-minded, I'm really emotional. So I do understand that, like, because she's looked at things differently than I have, we have turned out differently.
Well, what do you make of that?
My personality type was different from hers to begin with.
Personality.
I was more emotionally sensitive, and she was more logical. So, and you know, I do believe that, like you said about the two women who got raped when they were young, like one looked at it one way and one looked at it another way. But I feel really sorry for the one who ended up on the drugs and stuff, because she was obviously born like more sensitive to things. Like some people are born more sensitive, some people are affected more by the same thing. You know, I think maybe I'm one of those people. You know, I don't want to be one of those people, and I don't even like I'm surprised being like that.
What if it were only your thinking? Just what if? You know, like the tough thing, you know, for people, I think, is that, you know, if we think that there are things that are out of our control, like we're born a certain way, we have a certain personality, we're stuck with it. The stars have made us, you know, the way that we are, or something like that. Inadvertently, without us really wanting to, we are giving up our power to those things. And, you know, we feel powerless in relationship to those things. And I've seen over and over and over again how when we, as I was saying yesterday, but you weren't here, that when we take our power back, because we know we're the ones who have it, and we can only have the illusion that we're giving it away, but we can give it away to those other things, and then we're powerless in the face of them. So that's why I'm saying, like, just sort of plant a question mark in your mind. You know, is this really true? Is it really true? Like, if I really look at it, Is it really true? Yes.
If I could share an anecdote that speaks to this, because I see precisely where you're coming from. So 16 years ago, I was 24, went through drug rehabilitation, just done it upon myself. 7-8 days later, I was in deep drug-induced psychosis, psychiatric visits daily, monitoring to see if I needed to go to psychiatric hospital. So I was off work, and about a week and a half into it, I'd become a child. It's weird, but I asked my mum, could I hold her hand, walk into the shop, and I was 24. So my personality had completely dissipated, and whatever was left was what was keeping me going. It was a little child. I couldn't watch telly, any drama, I burst into tears. Anyway, the point is, I flipped a trigger point. So one minute I'm thinking I'm a little boy again, and we was in town, and I had heart palpitations, and my mum just deviated, wanted to go to the shop, come back. And I'm creating this story in my head, I'm going to faint, I need to get to the car, She come back, and we're waiting for this, and we'd missed the lift to go up into the multi-story car park. And in broad daylight, I shout out, "You're such a selfish woman. How could you do this? You know." Anyway, we got home. She rose above me, went into my bedroom, and she come up and threw a pile of ironed clothes at me. And she said I'd gone into the shop, so she'd had to get something to that washing powder, because I'd run out of washing powder washing my clothes. The trigger was the timed aggression, or the timed retaliation. And I lunged her and started strangling her on the hallway. My brother was at the foot of the stairs, and I was completely psychotic. I told him to back off. He went and phoned the police, and about 20 minutes later, as soon as I told him to back off, I realised what I was doing, and luckily for me and my mum, it was a rather pathetic attempt to strangle her, really, because she was straight back up downstairs, and I was shaking in my bedroom thinking. So 2 policemen came up shortly after, and they said, "What happened?" And I said, "She did this when I was little." I was the little boy again. And she should take her own medicine. And he didn't buy it, he just looked straight at me. He said, "How old are you?" 24. He said, "When are you going to take responsibility for your own actions?" And bingo, right there. I got it. I got the principle before I come across the principle. I was recreating that story and blaming her for the way I interpreted my life. Now at that point I felt an overwhelming amount of guilt. That was kind of like, for me, the nail in the coffin, because I was already beating myself up anyway, because I've lost my girlfriend to serious illness myself at that point. So I said, "Well, I just want to go for a walk, thanks." So I said, no, you don't. Well, because I was going to top myself. I suddenly realised, it was all me in the first place, and I'm projecting this out to her. But I stayed, and I suppose if there's anything I could, what I did was I told her how I felt, and I worked it through with her. I said to her, "Look, this happened, I'm not blaming you, but this is how it impacted me. This is how I felt about it." And 24 hours after that, I mean, the relationship's fine. She was philosophical, she understood context, and she could see the remorse that I felt. And luckily there was no permanent damage at all in that moment. But I had to tell her how I felt about the experiences I had and how I interpreted that. And I think part of to bring closure, if the consideration of continuing to recreate the past doesn't work, what helped me was was going to the person that I felt had an effect
I
on.
mean, I have done that, and
Yeah.
like I had loads of counselling when I was younger. It's like, as far as my parents are concerned, I absolutely adore them. I forgive them for everything. I believe on a spiritual level. I chose my life the way it was because there was lessons for us all to learn. I don't actually hold bitterness towards people in my past, but I am aware. Well, I think that my past created like the problems that I have, some of the emotional problems that I have now. It's like. I mean, it's hard to explain in the room for people I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I have had that closure with my parents. Like we had really heated. I mean, they put me in care when I was 12. That was like a big thing. But that's not something I hold against them now. And my behaviour towards them isn't something I hold against me. We've got a really good relationship now. But I'm still left with scars on my personality, and my thought patterns go like crazy sometimes. Like. I mean, I got diagnosed 10 months ago with a personality disorder that I didn't know I had, like borderline personality disorder. But
I think I've snuck under the radar.
Just jump in for a second.
I've really bought into that as well, and I'm sort of, I've like read up so much about it, and now I feel like I'm reacting to how I should be within this personality disorder type. So.
This demonstrates a couple of things. First of all, something that worked for us may not work for anybody else. So when we go to, here's what worked for me, this could work for you, we're in tricky territory here, all right? But what's important about what you said is that your thinking shifted. At some point, your thinking shifted. And see, there's two things to me that give automatic hope. One is that our thinking can change at any moment. We could be thinking the same way for 50 years. Thought can change. It can happen instantly. You never know when it's going to happen. Automatic hope. The second thing is that this spiritual essence that we have that gives us our well-being can never be stomped out. And it shows itself from time to time when we forget about ourselves. Even psychotic people, it shows itself when they forget about themselves. Even if it's for a split second, it's there. So, and the thing is, as long as we think that we're stuck with something, we're stuck with something. That's the power of thought. But when we know, or when we question, wait a minute, I wonder if all this stuff I've been thinking all these years, I wonder if I'm really stuck with this for the rest of my life. Like, is it possible that it could be my own thinking? Is it possible? Just planting that in there can be a shift. Maybe tiny at first, but of enormous magnitude. You got to say something, Sheela.
I love that you said that. I don't know if people in the room felt when the discussion started happening. For me, I really felt that there was a contraction. And I'm not pointing fingers or anything. It's just like how it's so interesting how we get stuck or caught up in personal thinking, and we know, and it felt like it was getting contracted. And I feel like, Jack, you've just like opened it up again. I love that. Like if we can stay open to the possibility, if we can stay open to what's possible, that's what creates the hope, isn't it? That's what creates. Well, for me anyway, it feels like, oh, there's so much more. You know, it's not just that one way that I see things. it could be, it could be, it could be. And then it's like we're not fixed. It's like personal thinking somehow has us believing that we're fixed in this way. And this is the only way I know how, and this is what I've always done, so this is how it's always going to be. And we run that story, I do. I mean, if I did it, ask for a show of hands, I imagine that most people in this room would say, there's something wrong with me somewhere. I could hold my hand up. And yet, I started off at the beginning by saying we've got this core of absolute perfection. Every single human being has a core of absolute perfection. Peace, love, wisdom, whatever you want to call it. And then we layer, Jack said it's so simple, and then we layer this stuff on top and lose sight of the diamond inside. I love that analogy. Do you know the analogy of the diamond and the horse poo? And so we're this shining diamond. That's who we really are. That's who we all are. And then the thinking goes on top, so we're layering it on with the horse manure. And then on top of that, there's so that's our personal thinking. Then we think, we can't let people know who we are really, because we believe that we're this horse manure instead of the shiny diamond. And so then we put this layer of nice, shiny nail varnish around it. And this is who I am, and then we project something out to the world. We pretend to be, we play the role, which is what I was talking about earlier on. And we play this role of who we think we should be, so everybody thinks we're okay. When underneath we're probably believing in this, horse manure stuff, when in actual fact it's the diamond inside and all that. That's what I love about the principles, because they're pointing us back to that diamond. It's the simplicity of that we are this diamond. And the principles are saying, look, you're creating this illusion with your thinking, and yet this is who you really are. Don't need to believe that stuff. We don't need to buy into that stuff. Who we really are is, in the room before we talked about, I think we're all the same. The oneness. And that's when the feeling, for me it feels like as we expand and recognise that, we have that feeling, there's a feeling of oneness. I'm imagining that most people in this room have felt more connected with other people at times and then not. That contraction as a personal thinking says I'm different and nobody, don't want to spend time with people. And then we remember and it's like, we're all the same. We're all the same. There's nothing to be hiding about. That's what it felt like to me at the retreat that we had, that was like, warts and all, let it all hang out. We're all the same, we don't have to pretend for anybody. Because most people, when we had 25 people in a circle, at the end, everybody was walking around with very similar insecurities. And when that came into the light, people then felt like we had permission just, it's okay, we've got insecurity. And it's okay, we've got the past. And, we've had shit happen to us. And we're still here. We've only got now. It's only this present moment right now. Let's enjoy life, let's laugh, let's be together.
Some of us were climbing this huge rock mountain the other day.
in fact, in
Yeah. It's a big rock. And there are places in it where you kind of have to have your wits about you. And in those places, everybody has automatic well-being. Because we're not thinking about ourselves at all. We are just right there with the moment. That's the only way well-being can appear to disappear.
Jack, so just very quickly, my daughter was there for a school trip the same day that you guys went to Cairo.
Oh, I probably have a picture of her.
And the day before she said, I really don't want to go out, I don't like walking, I'm really not going to have a very good day. And when I saw her in the afternoon, when I picked her up from school, I said, "How was your day?" And she went, "Do you know what, we only went halfway." So like, a complete reverse about how she'd been thinking about climbing the mountain the day before. She was actually disappointed that she hadn't got up to the top.
See, change of thinking, change of experience.
So simple.
Yes, Mark.
There's just a thing that just keeps jumping back into my mind when I first was impacted by the principles, and it was some of my own stories that I made up about myself that I suddenly saw that I was making up. One of them was that I was shy, and people who know me now, they go, "Where do you get this idea from that you're shy?" You know. But I still, that even now, I believe it to be true, and it's just from some of my conditioning when I was younger. But it was somebody said to me that, and I was really believing this certain. It wasn't just about shyness. It was something that various things about who I was, what I was, about how things were in life. And they were talking about the solidity of thoughts, or how we treat a thought as being a real thing, as an actual thing, a solid thing. And I can't remember who said it, but they just basically said, if you remoulded that shyness thought that you have about yourself into a chair and placed it behind you and sat in it, you would go straight on your ass. And it really just suddenly helped me see how, and I forget all the time because I've got certain thoughts that come up that are pretty bloody solid in my mind, but it helps me sometimes to reflect on that, how it's just we can't help it. We can't often make them such solid things in life. And
yeah, and the great thing about that is that it's not what that person said.
No.
It's what you heard.
Yeah.
And what you heard is your own thinking, and it shifted you.
Yeah.
That's a great point, Jack. Steve. You usually say that. That's a great point. That's a great point about the lifting, is what I mean. I think that's really important. So, all these people in this room, and you're all hearing different things. That's all. That's the principles in action, isn't it? Creating the illusion, or having a different experience. I think it's 1:30.
Well, thank you all.